The next time you're frightened in the dark, don't scream.
Roommate from Hell by Expression 399. Never move in with a man or woman you've never personally known. I got a roommate from hell this way. The man tortured me psychologically when I turned his sexual advances down. Then he stole thousands of dollars from me over time. He even used my Amazon account to open up an account. And he got some personal info like social, etc. Once I left after calling the cops to help me leave, and he showed up at the Apple store I was at just a day after I left. He would bang on the wall across from mine every morning and late at night to startle me awake. He'd throw pebbles or tap on my window in the middle of the night to scare me and keep me on edge. And he'd give me weird little candies and teddy bears as if we were dating. He even ordered stalkerish love items on my own Amazon account. I mean, who the fuck spends this much on a Christmas ornament that says, "I'll always love you and follow you," or something along those lines? If I'd go to the restroom, he'd run and kick his foot at the door so loud and suddenly that it sounded like a door being kicked down. He'd steal my items if I left them alone for even a second so I'd have no way to go out if I had plans. That he'd put them back once I mentioned them, or when it was too late for me to leave my plans. He kept me home this way a lot. If I got any mail or package, he'd interrogate me. "What did you order? I need to know." It was like he thought he owned me or something. Towards the end, I was locking doors and putting furniture up against the door because he picked my bedroom lock while I was gone. And when I'd wake up, sometimes there was stuff missing or moved in odd ways, so I knew he was creeping around while I was asleep. I mean, he was an absolute freak. I wouldn't put anything past him since he showed me how psychotic he was. If I was happy or in a good mood, he'd start criticizing and nitpicking at my body, hair, face, behavior, voice, anything he thought I was insecure about. I even developed an ED because he always did this and mocked and laughed at me when I would make or eat food. Any time I'd leave my bedroom, he would rush out of his room to stand right behind or near me like a weird little dog that follows you around panting. I'm pretty sure he even pissed in my hair products or skin products. I do know he'd throw out food I had just bought, and as I mentioned, he'd steal my cash and even used my debit cards. It was the strangest thing. If anyone else had dealt with this, they'd go insane. Even though I left to go live on the streets, I don't have any family or friends. I was severely abused as a kid. I've been on my own since 14, actually, so I'm accustomed to surviving on the streets for periods of time. I was 1,000,000 times happier than I ever was in that nice apartment, surrounded by nice things in a fancy car. I felt so relieved even just living in a concrete garage. I was 1,000,000 times happier sleeping on concrete with a pillow made of a towel and a tiny little blanket in the cold than I ever was living there with him. He spent his time psychologically torturing me, and I don't regret leaving at all. I still have trouble believing this stuff happened, as it was just so crazy to even think that someone is crazy enough to do that. I got a cop fired, and now I think he's stalking me, by Raccoon Bandit. To give some context, I used to be a 911 dispatcher for a small city. We dispatched all law, fire, EMS for the entire county, and within this county were multiple law agencies. I'd been there for about 3 months or so when I met him. Let's call him Jake. Jake had recently transferred from a big department in California and landed himself randomly at our department. It didn't make much sense as to why he left California in the first place, but he always insisted it was just time for him to move to a smaller and less dangerous department. He and I quickly became close and would chat almost every day after I got off shift. Within a few months, it became apparent that we liked each other, and our flirting progressed into something more serious. Fast forward a few months later, and it turns out he was doing some inappropriate things to photos and videos of me while he was on active duty. This and a few other things he had kept hidden on duty led him to losing his license and leaving. During the process of his termination, his sergeant had suggested I get a protective order against him as he had made threatening statements previously towards me, such as, You'd better be telling the truth. I'll find out on Tuesday if you're lying to me, etc. I'd begun to fill out the paperwork and was told I had a temporary protective order on him in the meantime, but I don't think I ever did. About 2 weeks after his termination, he called me to catch up. The entire call was like an old friend to another old friend. What am I doing for work? Do I have a boyfriend now? But progressively, things turned more personal. When did my shift end? What do you actually drive? Being 18 and naive, I treated him like I always had, answering his questions. I had contacted his old department afterwards, as his sergeant had told me to let him know if I was ever contacted again. But they turned me away pretty quickly and didn't want anything to do with it. With that, I blocked Jake. Roughly a month later, I got a call from a new number, and it was Jake. Once again, he wanted to meet up and catch up. But this time he was so casual, going on about telling me about this new house he's wanting to buy in my neighborhood, knowing it's my neighborhood. I had never told him where I lived in town, let alone what specific neighborhood. During that call, he progressively got more aggressive as well, making statements such as, "If I knew I was going to get canned, I should have just had my way with you." He half-heartedly joked about getting a hotel room just for me, and that was that. A few days later, he FaceTimed me and once again came off as simply wanting to catch up as he was sick. Midway through our seemingly normal conversation, he made it apparent he'd been touching himself the entire time. Keep in mind, nothing suggestive was mentioned, and our conversation at that point was about his new dog. He's blocked once again, but has tried to follow my social media, and now I've started to see him in my area. The last I knew, he lived nearly 30 to 45 minutes in the opposite direction from me. Am I reading into this, or should I generally consider this stalking? The Midnight Teen Urbex Adventure by Standard Alfalfa 207. This story happened a while back. I was 15 or 16 at the time and was a member of a youth group. I won't say the real terms for privacy's sake. Normally, we just gathered Saturday afternoon and had some fun with games organized by older people who were in charge. But this time we could stay the whole weekend, so Saturday morning till Sunday afternoon. I was the oldest in the group with 3 others, 2 of which were a year younger than me and my friend. We had a great Saturday playing different games with the younger children, etc. But when night came, we could stay up longer. So we sat around the campfire with our leaders and just chilled a bit. It was getting late, and the 2 younger ones went to sleep. They watched YouTube all night. Me and my friend, who are about the same age, were talking, and he suddenly hinted that we could basically do anything we wanted. Most of the leaders were asleep or just thought we wouldn't do anything stupid. He began talking about this abandoned vacation home for schools from a big city. I'm a fervent urbexer, so this piqued my interest. We were located next to the sea, so it was common for bigger, more inland cities to make places of residence for their schools to come and enjoy the sea. But this one was abandoned for some reason. And that's how we went to take a walk at around 11:30 for about an hour and a half. We had to travel through some forest paths, and that's how we ended up on a big road in a pretty nice neighborhood. At the end of this road was located a pretty big building. It was kind of sinister. The city lights made it look yellowish, and all the windows were broken. I saw that pretty much all entries were boarded up and asked my friend how we could even get in. And that's when he told me there was a way through some dunes that connected some roads. I asked him how he knew all this, and he'd said he'd spent a lot of time there having fun. He also knew there was a squatter there, but basically everyone in the region knew him, and he even talked to the guy sometimes. We hopped a gate and entered the complex through some broken doors. It was already midnight by then, so we had to use our phone flashlights to see. The floor was full of rubble and broken glass, and it smelled moldy. Each room was dark and humid. I could only see about 5 meters in front of me, and I was already pretty scared, but I just manned up and followed my friend. We went up to the 3rd floor, via the first stairwell, because this is where my friend and his friends hung out. You could see that his friends did hang out there sometimes. There was less rubble, it smelled like fireworks, and there was some trash like cans and ships on the ground. We had some fun adventuring around, and it was a great time. But then all of a sudden, I was completely alone. I stood still and heard a banging noise from a room a bit further. I went to check, a bit hesitant and pretty scared. That's when I saw my friend come out of a room, holding a sink he had just kicked out of a counter. I was relieved, but a bit confused why he had a damn sink in his hand. He looked at me and smiled and told me to follow him. So I did. He led me to a room with broken windows. Almost all the windows were broken in this building, so I wasn't alarmed. But suddenly my friend had the great idea to throw the sink through a hole in the glass. I watched as it fell 3 floors and broke on impact. I looked at him and he had a big smile, and so did I. In my innocent teen mind, I thought to myself, that's the coolest thing I ever saw. We laughed loudly. A bit too loudly. Not even a minute later, my friend told me to turn off my flashlight after hearing some noise, which plunged us into total darkness. That's when he heard it. A scream so satanic it could hardly be discerned as human. Yet it was. Our big exciting stunt had woken up the squatter that lived there, and he wasn't happy about it. We heard him banging and breaking things, and me and my friend went straight to the second stairwell because he knew he would be at the first. Luckily, most of the building was dimly lit by streetlights, but my heart was beating senseless, and I had to keep my breathing under control. After years of playing scary hide-and-seek games in the forest nearby with my friends at night, and other things I did with friends, I had mastered this. I was scared shitless, but my thoughts were clear. We had to get out of there. We slowly descended each stair, checking every door, until we ended up at the first floor. But we couldn't go any further. A bed placed up against the stairwell blocked us, so we had to go back up to the second floor. That's also when I noticed the silence. The dreadful silence. All the banging and screaming had stopped as suddenly as it started. The squatter was stalking us, making no noise like a predator stalking its prey, making it more nervous and panicky each second that passed. We silently made our way to the first stairwell and stopped for a while, standing almost perfectly like statues. The squatter knew we had to get out of there through that exit. It was the only exit there was. I looked up to my friend and he asked me if I was ready to run. I nodded and we counted to 3. Big breath. 1, 2, 3, go! We both rushed through the stairwell, jumping multiple stairs at once. Our hearts were pounding, every step meticulously calculated to not fall or step on any broken glass or rubble. Finally exhaling and inhaling as hard as we could, we're on the first floor, right through the double door. There it was, the exit. My legs were outputting more force than ever before. The final sprint, and I looked back. My friend was still there. We jumped through the broken door and leaped over the fence, and a last sprint to the road, and it was over. My heart was pounding, my eyes wide, and my body was stiff. I was standing there in front of my friend with the biggest smile ever. And that's when I became addicted to adrenaline. Nothing could satisfy me more than that feeling. We walked back to the campsite and no one asked us anything. And since then I've told this story countless times to others and went back to the home too. I may have been a bit too scared or paranoid at the moment, but it was a great moment and a story that I can share with others. I was really innocent and naive at the time, I know. A lot of people wouldn't have even dared try to step foot in that building. But I did it and made a friendship and a story I'll never forget. Might not be scary to everybody else, but I was scared shitless at that time. And that's true.